Welcome back to Flashpoint. This is part 2 of my interview with Dennis Mortensen, CEO of X.AI, which is a scheduling service that uses artificial intelligence to make your life easier. So we talked about the business in the first one, but in this part 2, it is ridiculous knowledge bombs galore, which is the point of this show, is to give you life lessons from leaders, entrepreneurs, and veterans. So what are some of the knowledge bombs? He talks about how your entrepreneurial journey could not ever be option B. He talks about what it was like to come from, overseas to the States. Why he decided to do that. He talks about having your family involved in your business and how it's actually a plus. So please take a listen, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. I really appreciate your support. Enjoy the episode. Is there any part of you or advice you would give to young entrepreneurs about who are scared to fail and think they need to maybe re-enter the corporate environment? Because I know some people just don't think they can stomach it once you've tasted it, even if it's not that successful.
I think there's multiple ways you can kind of look at it. So there's certainly the idea of a venture capitalist who will raise X amount of $1 million, invest into 20 some odd companies, expect that almost all of them go tits up, a few of them go sideways, and one or two will turn out to be winners. That is kind of their hit rate.
Yep.
And that suggests that amongst all the companies where they only say yes to a select few, but even of the select few, almost all of them don't pan out. If you believe then that whatever venture you start today, your first one even, will be successful, that seems like you are suggesting you can beat the odds at some extreme level. So perhaps if you think of this not as this one venture will be the one that define me as a human being, define me for the remainder of my life, define me as I kind of go forward, perhaps this is just one out of many.
Yes.
Perhaps you run the 50-year fund. You can't run them in parallel, you have to run them in serial.
Yes.
And then close your eyes and think, if entrepreneurship, no matter where I sit in the organization and no matter big or small, perhaps I just do 10 ventures, I live a good life, I assemble a ton of fantastic stories. Some of them will not work out, some of them will work out. I'll get a little bit extra money for those that did work out. My kids will go to college. And that, I think, is certainly a more realistic view. But in that view of the world, you have to think of entrepreneurship as a lifelong career. And that is perhaps the contrarian view for where most people take any commentary from Y Combinator or read 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, and everybody in that camp suggests that entrepreneurship needs to be some sort of calling, that there's some pain that you need to remove at all costs and you cannot not do it, and only then do you jump into the pool. I think entrepreneurship is something for where you can be better at your second venture versus the first one,
yes,
and even better at the third one. And surely good ideas, perfect timing, right team are all kind of variables, but you are certainly still perfecting a skill that I think can be perfected. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to run the 50-year fund, and to answer your question, I think they should very much accept that it's really just a unlikely chance that the whole thing will succeed, but that they'll have plenty of fun, they'll extract plenty of learnings, and if the first one didn't pan out, that shouldn't suggest they shouldn't do the next one. If anything, now you got half your MBA, please go do the next one, right?
So someone actually said to me once, when I was talking to them about my venture, they're like, I don't think you're the number one, I think you're a better number two. But that's also something you could learn from that, from trying it out and seeing like, wow, maybe I partner with someone like Dennis or an up and coming Dennis and be like, I could be the number two and I could execute all these operations and I can make your life easier. So I think there's a lot to learn from the experience itself. surrounding job description and resumes. And I loved your answers, and that's why we're sitting here today, because I'm like, this guy is for real. So I asked you, someone who wants to apply to work for you or be part, well, I'll let you get to that part, but here's the job specs. Here's Rich Cardona, MBA. I've done some good things. I flew a $24 million helicopter. Like I could do things, but I don't think I'm cut out for this job with Dennis. But I think my capabilities are there. Tell me how you assembled this team and how it's slightly unorthodox, and I loved what you had to say.
There's obviously different types of ventures with different types of challenges, and some of them will not be weekend hackathons or 3 weeks in Palo Alto over the summer. And there's nothing wrong with that, for where you and me could hack some app together this weekend and push it in the App Store on Thursday, and sometimes you win that lottery, and great for you when you win it. But some things take effort above and beyond that, for where it's going to be a reasonably long journey.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I actually find it almost exciting. But if you need to find people for where the journey is going to be longer than the weekend, longer than the summer, perhaps even year long before we can see any light at the end of the tunnel. And even when we get there, we won't be entirely sure whether have we reached America yet, right? So in that setting, I'm not so sure you can hire people on a 7 bullet point job description or an offer letter or a set of kind of options. What you need is some different type of commitment. So what I did, and could be completely crazy, but I certainly believe in it, is that I wrote up this pledge. I said, surely I'll make sure you have all the proper legal documents in place, so you get paid on time and you get your benefits and all of that stuff. But I really wrote up a half-page pledge, as in, this is the mission I think we're on. Do you see what I see? As in, do you feel that same level of excitement for what you have signed up for?
Yep.
And it was not a pledge that described in technical detail what we were supposed to solve here. It was more on the elements that I was seeking. And I'll just pick one item from it, for where I specifically asked for people who were comfortable in the dark. And we can then kind of again have a laugh for it. Dennis, are you speaking to adults or who are you hiring?
No,
saying,
this is so good.
Why does that even matter? What do you even mean? But I'm certainly trying to ask people for where you're going to be working on something on Monday and on Friday and next month and over the summer, where it will not be clear always whether you have even moved forward, or whether are we fighting the right battle, and you'll feel confused and you'll be in doubt and all of those things, for where if you're not comfortable in the dark, and some people are not, then this is not the right setting for you, and we shouldn't be teaming up. But if you are, this is going to be a really exciting mission. As in, we will most likely fail, but there'll be a lot of glory, both in what we're fighting for and if we actually do get to the end. And that pledge, which, by the way, in the very early days, and we did the same in our last venture, we had people sign. And if you then ask my counsel, Dennis, you muppet, why do you have people sign a document which is not legal in any way, shape, or form? That's just silly. As in, now you've gone crazy. And then I tried to explain to him, as in, no, I think you might just be crazy. As in, what do you think people really commit to? Do you think they commit to the offer letter? Do you think a at-will employmentship in the US is a commitment? No, it isn't. This might just be a commitment. This willingness to actually read that, and I had people read it with me in front of them, as in, we sit here now, I want you to, do you feel what I feel? And then we both sign it. That's commitment. And I'm not saying it's the best way, but it's the best thing I could come up with. So that's a slightly unorthodox way of hiring that first pool of people.
So we spoke before, and I mentioned leadership development is something I'm extremely passionate about. That to me is an enormous leadership move, because it involves empathy, it involves a commitment, it involves an almost inevitable failure. And how did you, so tell me how it is when you identify, or let me actually back up. How did you what made you think of that? I mean, because that is an inherent leadership quality. That is setting an example. And I understand the premise of it, but was there a moment where you're like, this is how I have to lead? This is how people are going to get bought into what I'm bought in on?
Like anybody else, you take strong notes on things that do not work.
Yes.
And when things do work, you never have the full certainty of, if I just replicate this from one setting to the next, I know with strong conviction that it will work again. That is not always the case.
Correct.
And I've certainly seen plenty of people who signed up under a traditional set of documents to some idea of a universe which wasn't fully aligned to mine, and we never really walk kind of step in step. And whenever it didn't kind of pan out, it was rarely because, oh, I didn't pay you on time, or you didn't get the benefits that I promised, or that you wouldn't do engineering as your job title kind of said. All of that was true, right? And we always delivered on that. But somehow you had something else in mind of both the journey and the struggle and the grit and the destination and the time in getting there, where that's how people ended up 9 months later saying, I'm not seeing it, or I'm not feeling it, and used very kind of non-legal terms for why they were walking out the door. And I was trying to solve for, if they're not seeing that, how do I make sure you see more of it earlier on?
Yes.
So that you at least can see, this is who I am signing up with, this is where we're headed. And if I also close my eyes, I can almost imagine the journey. Not entirely, but I can almost imagine it. And if that imagination doesn't click, let's not get started.
Yes.
Because it's going to be a dangerous journey here.
Yep. So I asked earlier, I told you I was going to ask, and I'm going to ask now about your Flashpoint. And again, for the audience, Flashpoint is the lowest temperature of fuel that will ignite or combust with an ignition source. So for you, was there one or a significant moment in your life that changed the trajectory of how you approach business, of how you approach your personal life? Maybe it was a decision to come to the US. Did you have a significant flashpoint that just kind of turned your world upside down in the way you think or operate? And I'm sure there's many, but
there is certainly a real kind of semi-dramatic moment in time when we moved out. So anybody moving from one country to another, I would suggest, certainly for those who have done it, that that's a moment they remember. Not just as in, that was interesting, but you're now moving away from a setting where you know all the rules, you can almost kind of see the end. Why? Because you got a set of parents across the road for where they played it almost to the end, right? As in, you can see that picture in full. Then you move away. There's a new set of rules, a new set of people. You can't necessarily see the end. There's nobody across the road. That was very interesting. But if anything, and it's obviously something that we speak of so often at home, me and my wife, for where had it not been a little bit random, because it wasn't overly designed, for where 17 years ago we moved out, our lives would have been very different.
Yes.
And we would like to believe not as good. And it's probably one of the better things that have happened. But it did two things. Set us out on a new path, which was full of many more adventures, because you're now already in an uncertain setting. Mm-hmm. And adding additional uncertainty doesn't seem as dramatic, right?
Yes.
But what it also did was that it really brought us closer. Yes. So I've been with my wife for 24 years. Excellent. On December 3rd, mm-hmm. which in this day and age,
yes,
is almost amazing, right? Shouldn't really be applauded, yeah. But in this day and age, it's almost amazing, right? And the one thing that kind of changed in the way I operated versus before was that I started to aggressively include my family into any one of our ventures. As in, I think
that's counterintuitive.
Yes, it is, and there's plenty of people who suggest if you run any venture, a one-man band, a 10-man band, a 100-man band, doesn't matter. You need to at least try to make a set of guidelines for when you run your personal life, when you run your business life. Yeah. And if you don't figure that out, the whole thing might just collapse. So I've done the opposite, where I try to see if I can run one life, a good one, but it is completely intertwined.
Yep.
As in, there's no special moment for where I'm at home or at work. I'm doing something now, which is fun, you and me talking, but it's not in some particular bucket, which I kind of label business. And I cannot talk about it when I get home. Yep. So I would include them kind of from that point where we moved out on forward into things you wouldn't include your family into. As in, I would initially hire my wife to kind of do the books. I would bring my daughters to pitch meetings with VCs, which by the way is a really good tactic because they now know something about me for where, is he crazy? Or is he super brave? What's going on here? And now this 11-year-old is sitting in the corner taking notes. What is he even writing? And the whole thing just worked actually perfectly in my favor. But I aggressively included them. That means for this venture, we needed a wall painted. I got a daughter. So you pick up one of your daughters, you come up here, I'll pay you $50, you paint the whole wall. It'll take you, X number of afternoons and that's that. But the point is that if you can somehow create a setting where the company is not the enemy, which it can very easily turn into, yes, as in
competing for time and
exactly. It is really just a finite amount of hours for where this other thing is now stealing hours that I thought were ours. Yeah. And then not only do you have to fight, 10 hours at some address around the office, then you have to fight another 4 hours when you get home. And that is exhausting. Yeah. And that I can see just turn into an unnecessary conflict. If it's one for where I think we could end an hour earlier today if you come and help me.
Yep.
Or I think I'm just half an hour short, but can you just read this through? Then we can be done by 7:30, mm-hmm. And it becomes not you against the company, but you, me, and the company, and trying to make the most of it.
Yep. It's so funny you say that because I believe I'm in a very similar situation where my wife is massively supportive of me. She actually was the one who's like, you need to resign from my previous job, and she encouraged me to go on this venture. Yep. But now she's involved, so I redid my website a little bit, and I had to review it, and I'm like, okay. And now she's involved, which, she could see the growth from a distance, but if she's sort of intricately involved, I think it's a little bit more pleasant. So I think you are so fortunate to have such a supportive family. I asked the Flashpoint. Now, yes, I understand moving here, but the Flashpoint for me, I think, when it comes to you is what made you move here? So what was the deterrent? What was, it's just not going to be the same here. Like, how did the aspirations get to the point where you felt like you had no choice but to come explore it here in New York?
So this being my 5th venture, we've been so fortunate to have 3 exits, mm-hmm. and one that didn't pan out. So certainly not too shabby. And at that moment, my 2nd venture, which did not work out, that was the Flashpoint. That was the moment for where I certainly sat in a setting for where not only is entrepreneurship not really applauded, it sounds like a plan B. Not as in, no, that's not only my plan A, wow. It's going to be my lifelong journey. And that was nearly impossible to explain to people. And then if you lose one, now it must be a plan B, or you should just go take a job like everybody else up the street. And that became really kind of that moment for where, no, I'm not, that's going to take decades. I could also move to a place for where they kind of surpassed that moment for where In any pitch I do, it's not like, ooh, on my CV to this particular venture capitalist or this particular kind of new candidate or this whatever. Don't mention this. Don't mention the war, right? As in, I speak openly about, this particular venture, which I still think is a good idea. These were the things we did. These are the things where it certainly looks like we made some errors, and that could be the reason for why it didn't succeed, but speak very openly about it. But it was certainly a moment for where, okay, that one not working out, getting to the end of it, what do we do now?
Yep, I love it. And I think that is it. This has been fantastic. I cannot wait to quote that one line, that it should not be a plan B, because I believe that if you're already potentially going to fail, then I always say, it's from a show, but never half-ass anything, whole-ass something. So you can't go into entrepreneurship half-assing it, because there's the large possibility that you're going to lose, so it cannot be a plan B.
So you and me have the same saying. So my version of that, which is very similar, is it is very easy to be kind of half-assed at 5 or 6 things. It's almost impossible to be world-class at one thing, but at least try.
Yes.
Give it your best. You might actually just get there.
Absolutely.
But if you're just willy-nilly touching 5 or 6 things, not really wanting it, don't even get started.
Of course, I agree. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it, and I will get